Hey everyone. I have a testimony that I believe needs to be shared, so I'm going to give it a shot. So about 3.5 years ago, I heard of this phrase, allowing God to use our story for His glory. And I'm like, oh, that's really catchy, that's neat. And over the years, over my whole life, as with everyone, I've had some horrible things happen. And I've always looked at these as roadblocks and as, like my sob story or things that have gone wrong in my life. But I've never really looked at them as good things. I mean, I looked at them as things that built me and got me to where I'm at today, but never really in a good way. And so my prayer has just always been that God would rewrite my story, that He would write my story for His glory, and that something good would come out of everything that I've been through. And so one of those examples is, about 3.5 years ago, I was dating a guy, and then he got in a car accident and he died. Long story short. 2 days ago, I was watching a show, and in it, there was a couple, and they were fighting, and then they got in a car accident, and the guy died. And that was very relevant to me, and in my head, I was like, oh, this should be triggering. And it wasn't that bad. I mean, it made me think about it, but it wasn't triggering. And so I don't know why, but I wanted to self-inflict pain or something. So I rewinded it and I tried again. I watched it again because I was like, I should really be crying. And so I watched it again and I still wasn't crying. And then yesterday I was praying and I was like, why didn't that hurt? Like I feel sad that happened in the show and it's really relevant to part of my story, but I wasn't like actively broken by it. And it made me realize that, so like a week ago, I was praying and I was praying out loud, and so I really didn't have anything to do with what was being said. It was just coming out. And so then part of my prayer was, thank you for all the blessings in my life that have gotten me to where I'm at now. And I stopped and I'm like, blessings? Like, those were horrible tragedies. And don't get me wrong, I know that everyone has hard things that happen in their lives. But I was just like, why am I calling those blessings? And it took me until like yesterday when I was thinking about that show, and I was realizing that the peace that I've been praying for 3.5 years has finally come, and I don't understand it. And that just kind of brings me to think about Philippians 4:7, where it talks about peace, which like exceeds anything we could ever comprehend. And I didn't even realize I had the peace until I was in the situation where if I didn't have it, it would have overtaken me. But instead, God had me. And I realized that, like, my brain and the world and everything tries to define how we're supposed to feel about certain things, but then God comes along and He injects peace where the world says that it's impossible to have it. And I just experienced the fruition of all of my prayers for a long time yesterday, and it was freeing. And it was just like, I can walk in this freedom and I can share this freedom. And I just want to encourage people that it took 3.5 years to get to this point where I'm just like at peace within myself. And it may not like it, I'm sure it'll come and go, maybe, but for now, I just have such peace about it. And not just about like that situation, but just a lot of things in my life. And the main point of this is that anything that's happened in your past can't be changed. We can't rewrite the past, but God can rewrite our story. And what I mean by that is that, like, once we hand our story over to Him, He can change our perspective. And when our perspective is changed, then so is our response to what's happened to us. And like I've said over and over, everyone has bad things happen to them, and no one has time to watch videos, and nobody cares. But, so I was battling with, like, I'm too awkward, and I'm not worthy of people hearing my story. But here it goes. When we accept Jesus into our lives, we become one with the Spirit. The Spirit of God cannot be defined. Its significance cannot be grasped. And so when we accept God into our hearts and we become one with the Spirit, then we become one with the Spirit, and therefore it's no longer ourselves or the world that defines us, because it's impossible to define the worthiness of what God's doing in our lives, because it's no thanks to me, and it's no thanks to the world or anyone around me, but because I asked God in my heart, and I said, please redeem my story. Please give me something that's good from this. And I just encourage you guys to know that you're worth being healed, and you're worth being seen, and you're worth being heard. And I say that for myself because but what it comes down to is that it doesn't take a shift in circumstances, because the situations in the world now and tomorrow or whenever, they may or may not change, but our perspective and our response to the situations around us can change. And that includes situations in our past and things that have happened in our past, because we can't go back, we can't change them, we can't unsay things, but God can rewrite that story for His glory and use it for good. And I just encourage you to keep praying and keep asking God to inject His peace where your logical brain and the world says that it's impossible to be healed in your brain or in your heart or even in your body, that God works in those places and He meets you right where you're at. And I just encourage you to pray. I encourage you to ask God what He has for you, and not that you just have the wisdom to hear Him, but the courage to act on what He has to say.